quickly, some FAQs. How much should I write? Okay, first thing to say is that it's about quality, not quantity. Okay, quality, not quantity. So it is better to make, let's say, 3 solid points, and I'll explain what I mean by solid in just a second, all right, then write, make 10 points, 8 of which are either irrelevant or push you over the time you have available, and so on, okay? So quality, not quantity. In terms of the actual number of lines, I'll just give you a rule of thumb that you can follow. If, for example, you have a 10-mark question, what that is implying is that, because normally the marking scheme gives you 2 marks for each fully explained a point, right? So that means you make 5 points, each earning 2 marks. Now, 2 marks means you've got 3.5 minutes in which to make that point. 1.8 minutes per mark, 3.5 minutes. So in 3.5 minutes, how do you make your point? There is a structure that you use. It's called state, explain, and apply, and I will talk more about that. And typically, that structure can be produced to make your point in 3.5 minutes in about 3 to 4 sentences. Okay, 3 to 4 sentences. But remember, it's not the length of the point of the answer that you're producing, but the quality of what you're saying. So this is just a rule of thumb. Typically, it's about 3 or 4 sentences. Okay. How important is it to learn theories and models? Again, something I touched on already. Theories and models should be thought of as a tool for you to use in crafting your answer. You will not be examined on your memory of a particular theory or model, okay? You will identify a theory or model which may be useful in analyzing the situation and producing an answer, in which case you use that model, but that's for your own use, okay? It is not something, as I've already said, that you would include in your solution. What is the point then of using the model? Number one, it makes sure that you cover all the points. So if, again, staying with competition, if you're going to use Porter's 5 forces to analyze the competitive environment, you know that there are 5 potential forces, and you look through each of them, and not all of them will be relevant to a particular question, but the ones that are, you will use that to analyze the situation and produce your answer. The other use of having a model, so staying with Porter's 5 forces, is that you can use the parts of the model as subheadings in your answer. So you might say threat of new entrants as a subheading, okay, and then make your point about it, okay, about that threat. So you've used Porter's 5 forces model, but you're not explaining it. You're not, showing off your theoretical knowledge. Okay, you're applying that model to create a practical solution, and you're using that model to give your answer a structure. That's how you use theories and models. Do you need to know them? Of course you do. Of course you do. There are some key models in most of the areas of the syllabus which are useful. Okay, which topics should I focus on? Now, again, very, very common question. In fact, I think we got that question asked today already. We've had it asked. Thing to remember, SBL questions are not topic specific, all right? SBL questions are real world based questions. So in the real world, you don't get a challenge, right? A business challenge, which is only about one topic, all right? About, I don't know, stakeholder expectations. Because in the real world, your stakeholder expectations have implications for lots of other topics. So let's say, for example, your customers want a particular type of product. That's a stakeholder expectation. However, in order to do that, to meet that expectation, you need to invest perhaps in improving the quality of your product or service. You're going to reduce the profitability perhaps in the first year as you make those investments. Your share price might come down. Your shareholder expectations will therefore be disappointed. Your share, there's a risk that your board of directors might be, removed by shareholders. All sorts of things, okay, which are relevant to meeting your customers' demands. right? And that's what you're expected to demonstrate as a professional person. You don't just say, well, this is how I'd make my customers happy. The board of directors would say, well, yeah, okay, but what does that mean for the business as a whole? Yeah, what does it mean? And all the things I've just listed, all right, are relevant to your solution. All right. So going back to the question, which topics should I focus on? It's almost impossible to say with SBL that this topic always comes up and this topic always comes up, because all of them, or most of them, will come up and will be relevant to your answers. So I know you've heard this with other subjects, right? But picking a particular topic or topics to focus on and become expert on, and then ignoring the others is not it's a very risky approach to take. So please don't do that. Okay, I want you to be familiar with the whole of the syllabus, and by practicing questions, get familiar with integrating topics from across the syllabus as relevant, as described in my example a couple of minutes ago. Okay, so which topics? All of them, and get used to integrating them in your answers. How do I earn my professional skills marks? Well, clearly professional skills, 20% of the total mark available, absolutely critical. How do we incorporate those? Well, the first thing to say is that we need to practice incorporating them in questions well before we go into the examination. What do I mean? So, for example, if your professional skill or the requirement says skepticism, then when you write your answer, when you're practicing, right, think about how you would demonstrate. So you'd say, well, I would like to challenge or question this assertion that whatever, this is not a threat or this is an opportunity. And then you would explain why you would challenge it. Now, that sentence, by simply using that terminology, that wording, is demonstrating skepticism, okay? Or you might say, I recommend asking the board of directors some more questions to clarify the situation. Again, using those words demonstrates skepticism. With communication as a professional skill, for example, all right, having the right format, making sure that the words you use are relevant to the audience. So if you're talking to a board of directors, which is multifunctional, you're not going to use kind of complicated financial terms. All right? If you start doing that, then you're not demonstrating the communication professional skill. Now, again, all of these come with practice, but the first step is to understand, and I'm not talking about memorizing, understanding what the professional skill actually means, all right? What it means. And there's a lot of information available on the ACCA website and student hubs and so on, which you can access to understand those. And then apply it, okay? Make a conscious effort to apply those professional skills when you're practicing exam answers, okay? So that's how you earn your professional skills marks. Now, how do we use our reading, planning, and reflection time? Just before we have a video, I just want to go through the steps so that you'll be able to kind of link these to the video as you watch it. So step one, read and analyze the overview. And typically the overview is in exhibit 1. All right, you need to do that to get the context of the organization. Step 2, copy paste all the tasks into the word processor response option. Just copy paste, all right? Very easy to do. All the tasks, including the professional skill part of the task and so on, just copy paste, easy. Then what you do, and this is about understanding the question, understanding the requirement, this is how you do that. You analyze each task, highlighting keywords, including the professional skill that's being tested, calculating your finishing times, note the number of points that you have to make, assuming 2 marks or 3.6 minutes per point, and may note any information that comes to mind, for example, a useful model. So if you know that there's a question on risk, all right, then you might think, oh, well, risk, I know, heat maps, that might be useful. We don't know yet whether it will be or not, but we'll write it down, okay, so that when we're producing the answer, we'll decide whether it is useful or not. If you can't think of a model when you're doing your planning, don't panic, it's okay, relax. All right? I'm just saying if something comes to mind, put it in. Okay? Read the exhibits and selectively highlight key information. All right? Now, I say selectively because a lot of students, when they read something, when they start highlighting, they highlight everything. Right? Everything. And really, that defeats the purpose of highlighting. Look, the point of highlighting is this. The point of highlighting the exhibits is this. It means that when you're writing your answer, okay, and you want to check, you want to think of additional points to make, and you want to go back to the exhibit. When you go back to the exhibit, your eyes immediately focus on the relevant information so that it's just faster, so that you can address that point in your answer more quickly. You highlight everything, it means you end up reading the whole exhibit again before identifying the point you want to make, right? So be selective about what you highlight, not everything. Okay. Also, as you read and analyze the exhibits, you might easily be able to connect a particular exhibit with a particular task. Because remember, you've read the tasks now, you understand what areas are being asked about, and very often you'll be able to connect the two things. And then take your time, use the full hour. Now, a lot of students make the mistake of jumping right into answering the questions, all right, and sort of skimming through the RPRT. Doing it quickly. Please don't do that. Please remember that the quality of your answer is much, much improved, all right, by spending the time understanding and analyzing the data that you have available and actually in your head getting everything structured, okay, in your head, in your plan, all right, and then when you start to answer the question, that's the easy part, all right, because you've already done much of your thinking. All right, so please take your time. In fact, even an hour is often not long enough to do this, all right, even an hour. And so what I would suggest is that after an hour, even if you haven't finished your analysis, you move on, okay? But do try, again, you get faster with practice, do try and do it within the hour. Okay, here we go with the video.
Okay, team, so what do we do in our RPRT time? We're going to see how that works, what we need to do here using the SBL March-June 2022 exam. Step number one, we look at Exhibit 1, which is the overview, and we highlight key information from this. The reason for doing this is it gives us a background, a context for the examination. What is the key information? How do we identify key information? Well, that's something that you get better at the more you do it. But for example, with this one, what have I highlighted? Well, there's a particular product, which is the manufacture of yachts, which is the biggest revenue earner. Okay, and the yachts are made of fiberglass, all right? I highlighted that. The yachts offer overnight accommodation, so these are for overnight journeys, leisure craft. They're made in standard molds, which means, of course, that there's the opportunity for economies of scale to be gained. Limited additional optional features, which tells you something about the kinds of customer that they would appeal to. So, for example, the super rich, when they buy yachts, want all the extra features. They have a second service line, which is the maintenance and repair of yachts. And they do that not only for their own yachts, but also other companies' yachts. Okay, so that's another revenue source. There are two main competitors. Okay, they tell you the names. They acquired 12 months ago a smaller yacht manufacturer, Bersham Company, and the founder of Bersham, Tony Bersham, became Yex Marine's chief executive. So why is that important? Well, it tells us who is leading the company at the moment. It also perhaps raises questions as to how the rest of the board would respond to this person coming in fresh to the company and going straight into the CEO role. That's why I highlighted that. However, it seems that most of the directors agree to what Bersham proposes, but he does have some opposition from the chairman. The board has 5 executive directors who are also 20% or shareholders in Yex Marine, with each one holding 20% of the shares. It has 3 non-executive directors. Now, again, the reason I've highlighted that is that although it is a private company, if it were to seek a listing, then one of the rules of listing is that we need equal numbers of executive and non-executive directors. Moving on to the next line, Yex Marine's board is currently discussing seeking a listing. Oh, well, look at that. Okay, so immediately that's something we need to think about, file away. We'll probably need to mention it somewhere in our answer. What else do we need to highlight? It's currently operating in 2 different sites, but they're both in the same town, so they're not too far away from one another. They're thinking of buying, in fact, they have bought a single large site, and they're going to consolidate the existing sites into that one. All the sales have been agreed, leaving a surplus of 10 million, which can be used for product investment. So suddenly we have some cash, and I'm sure somewhere in the exam we'll be asked what to do with it. Tony Bersham wants to use the move to the new site as an opportunity to transform Yex Marine's business, so some fundamental changes coming along, and he wants to increase gross and operating profit margins from 40 to 45% and 15 to 20% over 5 years. And Tony is seeking advice on a number of issues from Tranart Consultants, and so that tells you that's who you are going to be throughout this exam. Right, step number 2, you copy paste all of the tasks from the paper into your word processor, okay, your response option. In SBL, we only really need the word processor and the slides. So here's task 3. I've copy pasted the whole of the task and highlighted key information on this using bold. Unfortunately, when we are on the response option, we can't highlight using color. Okay, so key information, there are 2 investment projects, beg your pardon, summarized by the FD, and he's going to use the excess funds from the sale of the sites to finance the investment that they select. However, there are not sufficient resources to choose both options, and the question is all about our view on whether either of the proposed investments should be chosen. So that suggests we could say as a recommendation that neither should be chosen. I highlighted the word report because that is going to inform the format which we are going to use in crafting our answer. Also very important to highlight the word and, because that reminds us that there are lots of parts to this question. So we advise on financial and non-financial benefits and drawbacks of each of the investment projects. Okay, so there are 4 parts, if you like, to our answer for each of the investment projects, and we need a recommendation. Now, in a report, in any case, you would provide a recommendation that is required format by the ACCA. Okay, so highlight that. We also highlight the professional skill that's required, evaluation, and they're looking for justified recommendations which are based on balanced assessment of both projects. Right, so we've highlighted the keywords. What is the other data that we put down here? Well, we know that we'll probably make 10 points in the advice, all right, and 2 points in the recommendation. How do I get to those? Well, we assume that we're going to earn 2 marks per point, okay, and we'll talk more about that when we create the answer. So 2 marks per point, so I'm saying 20 of the 24 marks are going to be the advice, and 4 of the 24 marks for the recommendation. Now, we don't know this for sure, but it's a rule of thumb that we will use, and that is that we assume 2 marks per point made. Okay, so 10 points, we're going to spend 36 minutes on the advice. Why 36 minutes? Well, because we're going to earn 20 marks on the advice, and we're going to work on the basis of 1.8 minutes per mark. That makes 36 minutes. Now, my recommendation is that rather than write 36 minutes, put down the finishing time. It's just much easier. to do that in the RPRT, so that when you're actually doing the exam, you can check whether you've reached the finishing time rather than having to calculate how many minutes you've spent on each part. Okay, so put down the finishing time. I'm assuming here we start the exam at 9, or we start answering this question at 9 a.m. So the finishing time would be 9:36 for the advice and 9:43 for the recommendation. Okay, we've also put down here Exhibit 5. All right, sometimes it's fairly straightforward to link the exhibit to the question. Now, this is not to say that this is the only exhibit that we may need, but we know from looking at the titles of the exhibits that it is likely to be relevant to this answer. We do a similar thing for task number 4. Okay, the only thing I want to point out here that I've done differently is that I have also keyed in a couple of models or theories, if you like, which might be relevant. This question is on risk, and suddenly as soon as I hear the word risk, I think ALARP, as low as reasonably practicable, and heat map, all right, for risk assessment and risk management. Okay, so that's all I've done, and that's step 2 in the RPRT. Step 3 in the RPRT is now to look at the exhibits. You take each one in turn, you read through it, and you highlight again key information from that exhibit. A couple of things to remember. The first is, don't highlight everything, please. Okay, only highlight that information which is likely to form part of a future answer. I know you haven't had a look at the tasks yet, okay, or certainly not in detail, but you will know the kinds of areas that you're going to be asked about, okay, because you've analyzed the tasks. And so with that knowledge, you can identify what kinds of information or what information in the exhibits is going to be useful to us. All right, so here, more automation in production, improving standardization and efficiency. I've highlighted dominated by the big 3, so it tells you about the competitive environment and so on. Now look, my strong recommendation is to get to the first 2 steps done, all right, in about 10 to 15 minutes. The remaining time, which is about 45 minutes, take your time, read each of the exhibits carefully and highlight key information as you go along. Do not fall into the trap of jumping straight into answering questions without fully understanding all the information that is available in the exhibits and fully understanding the requirement of the examiner. Okay, so you're now ready to start answering the questions.
Okay, so hopefully you found that useful. If you have any questions on that, please make a note of them. We can try and address them in the Q&A at the end, okay? Let's now move on to actually answering the question. We're going to start with task number 3. Okay, remember we're going to be doing 2 tasks, tasks 3 and 4, and we're just going to go straight into that.
All right, so we're now ready to craft our first answer. We're doing question number 3 or task number 3. And the first thing we do, because we know the format required, is a report. So let us set that up. Head it up, report. And by the way, I would recommend writing answer because this is directly underneath the task that you've copy-pasted into the WP. So for the marker to be clear, put in the word answer so the marker knows that this is the answer. I put in a heading saying report, all right? And this is a standard structure that I always recommend to my students, from to, date, subject. And to be honest, I think, I would use that whatever the format required. So whether it's a report or a briefing paper, okay, I would invite you to use this structure. It just saves you having to think about it. Now, because it's a report, what we also need to do is we need to put in an introduction. So I'm going to do that now. All right, and there we go. Introduction. This report advises on the financial, non-financial benefits and drawbacks of each of the investment projects and recommends those reasons which, if any, should be chosen. Now, the sharp ones amongst you will realize or will recognize these words because they come straight out of the question. There you go. So all I've done is copy-pasted the requirement into my introduction and then just reworded it to make it sound like an introduction rather than a requirement, and that saves quite a lot of time. I'm now ready to start on the main body of the report. And again, what we do is we look at the task, okay, financial and non-financial benefits and drawbacks of each project. There are 2 projects, okay, and a recommendation. That's what's required of us. So a convenient way of preparing your answer format or structure is to use these words as subheadings. This makes it a lot easier for the marker to mark. It shows the marker that you've answered all parts of the question. It makes sure that you don't miss out any parts of the question. And it allows you to focus your thoughts on each topic as you start to put your points in under each of those headings, okay? So the next step is to use the terminology from the task and lay out some subheadings. So that's what I've done directly underneath the introduction. Okay, I've put in financial benefits for each project, financial drawbacks, non-financial benefits, non-financial drawbacks, and then recommendations. Okay, so there you are. There's a subheading, there's this framework of your answer, and it makes life a lot easier, as I said, for everyone. As you've noticed, I've also made the subheadings bold. Again, this takes a few seconds, but in terms of clarity and professionalism, it's well worth spending that time. Okay, now let's go back to our analysis of the requirement, see why we've done it. So we're going to make 10 points for the advice, right? 10 points for the advice, and there are 2 projects, so we're going to make 5 points for one of them and 5 points for the other. Okay, financial and non-financial drawbacks and benefits, right? So that's the number of points we're aiming to make for each. The other thing we look at is the exhibit, which contains most of the information, which is going to inform our answer. So we now go to exhibit number 5. We're going to look at the data from exhibit number 5, but we need to do it in a structured way. So what I would suggest is we start with the financial benefits and drawbacks, and we focus on dinghies on the first project first. Okay, so when we look at exhibit 5, we look only at the financial issues around the dinghies. So looking at the dinghies, we see that the price is 4,000, so it's actually quite affordable. So this is a mass market product, okay, and we're likely to be able to sell relatively high volumes of it. Okay, they're being sold to families, remember. Dinghies have healthy gross and operating profit margins, 35 and 12%. And the payback is 3.5 years. So it's quite a short payback period because, of course, the initial investment for making these is going to be smaller than for the yachts. The net present value, again, quite a healthy NPV, 5.5 million positive in 3.5 years, which is good news. Okay, it's high, and the initial investment required is 4 million, which means that we can, we will have a bit left over from the 10 million that we have available to invest. We expect our first revenue in 1.5 years. So we're going to start receiving money quite quickly. Okay, so that's the, these are all seemingly quite positive benefits. So let's put that into our answer. Okay, so here I've put it in here under financial benefits for dinghies, low initial investments of $4 million, which will leave 6 million to invest in the planned transformation strategy. Now, the second part of this is really, really important. If you simply say low initial investment of $4 million, which many students do, and they just leave it at that, you don't earn any marks, because all you're doing is repeating something from the task, right, from the exhibit. You always have to ask yourself, well, so what? All right, and the so what in this example is it leaves us some money to invest in other parts of our transformation strategy. Now, we know there's a transformation strategy in play because the question tells us this. I've also made a second point here. Also, our first returns are expected within 1.5 years. Yeah, fine, but don't stop there. Answer the so what question, and the so what answer is allowing faster working capital liquidity, helping our cash position. Okay, so always answer the so what question. Now, there are other financial benefits, but as we said earlier, you know, we have quite a lot to cover. I don't want to spend too long on just financial benefits of dinghies. Let's move on to the drawbacks and the non-financial parts of our answer for dinghies now. Okay. So what I've chosen to use as a drawback is that the gross and operating profit margins are 35 and 12%, and these are lower than for the yacht project. So I'm making a comparison here, but that's really the only comparison I can make for this particular metric. And then I go on to say, however, without comparative figures from other dinghy manufacturers, we cannot say whether these are acceptable or not. Okay, so we don't know if it's a drawback. It would be a drawback if it was lower than other dinghy manufacturers. But if you compare it to the yacht project, then of course it's much lower, and that may be a drawback. Okay. Okay, so non-financial benefits for dinghies. Again, I've identified two. Opportunities for customers to trade up to buying yachts from EX Marine. So we have a long customer life cycle, so we keep the customer for longer. All right, people are used to the EX Marine brand, and so when they're looking for a yacht, they'll hopefully come to EX Marine first. And the second point I made was these are not complex items, all right, which lend themselves to high volume standardized production as per the CEO's plans to introduce more automation, which is a piece of information that we got from exhibit number 2, the newspaper article. One other thing, in order to save time, I'm not putting full sentences in here, all right, but in the exam you would. Okay, I'm doing this in short form to save time here. Now, the only non-financial drawbacks I could think of for dinghies was the lower than market price for dinghies may be perceived to suggest a low quality, and that perception may impact on the wise yacht business. And that's all I'm going to say for dinghies. Now, have we made the 5 points that we had planned to? We've made more than 5. All right. So we've probably earned all the marks available for this part of the answer. Now, financial benefits for yachts. Well, I've just said the gross and operating profit margins are much higher than for the dinghy project. Then the so what? The so what is it's more likely to achieve the planned increases stated by the CEO. Remember, he said that he wants increases of 5% over 5 years in both of those metrics. The NPV is also much higher. It's higher than the dinghy project, 7 million versus 5.5 million. The so what, thereby producing a larger increase in shareholder wealth. Okay, there you go for the financial benefits. In terms of financial drawbacks, financial results are very dependent on a few large customers, so loss of even one such customer could completely undermine any benefits. Also, some of our customers will be overseas, will be running foreign, excuse the spelling there, let me just change that, foreign exchange risks, which may negatively impact financial results. Non-financial benefits of the yacht option, opportunity to use the skilled craftsmanship available within the company and improve staff morale. We're told in one of the exhibits that staff are not very happy about the move to standardization because they feel that their skills will no longer be required. So it'll improve morale. Non-financial drawback, the need to change customer perception so that the EX Marine as a viable alternative to pre-existing international competitors. Okay, so there are people out there internationally that make luxury yachts. Yachts Marine is not seen as one of them. So the whole process of changing perceptions and building up a customer base is a potential drawback. It takes time and money to achieve. Now, again, I remind you that here I've put the points in very short form to save time. All right, in the examination, you would write it out more fully in the way that I am explaining each point. Okay, and now we come to our recommendation. Now, the important thing in the recommendation is to actually make a recommendation, not just have a general chat about both options. Okay, so come out one way or the other. So I've kept it short. The production of dinghies would be my recommended option for a number of reasons. Payback period is much shorter than for yachts, meaning that the risk associated with this option is lower. Why is it lower? Because we get our money back earlier. Okay, so as the environment changes, which we expect it to do, we face fewer changes the shorter the payback period is. It also produces healthy profit margins, which are likely to be more sustained for a longer period as the market size is large. Remember, we're selling to the mass market, yes, families, and it is a relatively low-cost item, so we expect to be able to sell for a much longer time. And we'll also be gathering potential customers for our cruising yachts in the future. Now, you may say a bit more than that in the examination. It really depends on how much time you have available, okay? And remember, always, always, always keep an eye on the finishing times for both. And that's the framework for our answer to task number 3.
Okay, so I know that